All right. Well, welcome. This is Tim McDonald coming to you with another episode of Advocacy at Work. And today I am joined by another friend of mine, Michael Holtz. How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing great, Tim. How about yourself?
I'm doing wonderful and so appreciate you being here with us on Advocacy at Work. When I first got diagnosed, you were one of the first people I ever associated the word advocacy with. So I am just so thrilled that you're with us today. But before we get into talking about advocacy, why don't you just tell us a little bit about when you were diagnosed, what you were diagnosed with, and a little bit of your journey. We don't need to go into every detail of it, but just
Right.
to give people an overview.
Sure. So I was diagnosed with stage 3D rectal cancer in March of 2012, March 27th, actually, because we all know the date of our diagnosis, right? And I did essentially 11 months of treatment. I did oral chemo with radiation. I did surgery to remove the tumor, and then 6 months of FOLFOX. And first line treatment worked for me. I was declared NED in May of 2013. And I've been involved in cancer advocacy actually since before my diagnosis. I worked for the American Cancer Society at the time I was diagnosed. So I've been involved in cancer advocacy for 23 years now.
See, and I didn't even know that part. So we all learned something.
That's right.
We're lifelong learners if we want to be. So what was your role at the American Cancer Society that you were doing a form of advocacy while you were working before you were actually diagnosed with colorectal cancer?
So I was initially hired as a communication specialist. My background is journalism, and I was in PR for a hospital, St. Mary's Hospital, which no longer exists here in Knoxville. But the American Cancer Society had a bus tour for 6 months leading up to an event they did in DC in September of 2002 called Celebration on the Hill. And this bus went around the country. It was essentially a rolling billboard, but also a rolling petition for people to sign in support of increased cancer research. And the idea was that the bus rolls into Washington, D.C. while there's 10,000 people on the National Mall to let Congress know that the country supported increased funding for cancer research. Because at the time, but the funding percentage wasn't keeping pace with inflation, and so we were behind all of that. So I got a call from the American Cancer Society asking if they wanted to bring the bus to my hospital and could I help them get media coverage. And I was like, media coverage for my hospital? Of course. So the bus came. Every media outlet in town came and covered it. And 3 weeks later, I got a call from the American Cancer Society asking if I would come to work for them. At first I was like, oh, it's a nonprofit. They probably can't pay anything. And, just all of those things that you assume about nonprofit organizations. And they actually made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And I worked there for 12 years. And I moved from communications in sort of the global sense of the organization to media advocacy, where I specifically used communication skills and tactics to promote and try to put pressure on lawmakers around specific advocacy initiatives at the state and the federal level.
Interesting. So I know you were there, and thank you for explaining all that, because it does, I think, give a lot of context into, what you're doing today.
Sure.
How did that change when you were diagnosed? What happened, and kind of explain that time period for us?
Yeah. So I knew people who had been diagnosed. Actually, one of my dearest friends at the time, when I moved over to the American Cancer Society, had just had a recurrence of leukemia. So I knew people who had cancer, but it was still a theoretical construct in terms of I hadn't experienced it myself. So when I heard the words, "you have cancer," obviously that changed everything. And I wanted to use my communication skills to essentially demystify what it means to be diagnosed with cancer, to go through treatment, and with my wife Sarah's permission, and after my family, particularly the youngest members of my family, um, who were on social media, which at the time was like Facebook and barely Twitter. You know, this was social media's early days. Um, I went very public with every step of my cancer journey, from diagnosis to treatment to life with an ostomy, all the things. And so it was really an opportunity to help educate people about what it meant to go through cancer, because even in 2012, it wasn't something we talked about a whole lot.
As you were telling me that, it just resonated so much with me, because I mean, I didn't have the background that you did in working for the American Cancer Society, but I did have a, marketing kind of social media background.
Sure.
And I think it took me 3 days to, well, probably less than that, to figure out that I just wanted to spread the word and not have other people have to go through the importance of screening, all this stuff. But those 3 days were me trying to make sure that all my closest friends and family knew about the news before they read it on Facebook.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah, it was making sure everyone important to me knew. And then the other part of that is because I did media relations for a living, all of the media outlets in town covered the fact that the American Cancer Society communications guy had cancer. And like, I've been able to tell my story, through the local media in particular, quite often since my diagnosis.
And so we're talking a lot about like kind of that awareness kind of advocacy because of your media background. But, I know you today, and I know it's much more than that for you. And so, before we get too far into all the other things that you're doing in advocacy, if you were to explain what advocacy is, how would you explain it to somebody?
Certainly it has changed over time, but I think how I would explain it today is building relationships with people, whether that's lawmakers and their staff or the media, to really help people better understand the whole picture of what it means to be in the cancer space. And, I've had the opportunity to do some pretty amazing things over the course of my advocacy career, but really being the face of the disease in my community, which means sharing all aspects of it, from basic awareness to, the need for screening, to why research is important. And so for me, it's the whole gamut of issues that are related to my disease.
And so I know where you've gone with your advocacy, but explain like how you've moved into other elements. I know you mentioned when you were with the, before you even started working with the American Cancer Society, it was a bus going to DC. So that was legislative, even though you were working on the media side of things. So once you were diagnosed, how did you take just creating that local awareness and getting those media contacts into everything that you're doing today? And just, feel free to expand on everything, because I don't want people to assume just because I know your story.
Right. So, what I knew from the work I did at the American Cancer Society and the Cancer Action Network was that the stories of survivors have power. So as a survivor, as a patient, and then as a survivor, I knew that my story had more power than just me as a staffer for the organization. So I wanted to leverage that power in every way that I could, which meant, again, going on TV or meeting with reporters, meeting with lawmakers. I spoke before congressional research briefings. So me and, experts from NCI and the NIH, in a panel, talking to congressional staffers about what it means to be a cancer survivor and why research funding is important, what survivorship looks like. And now, in more recent day, let me back up and say, while I've always supported increased funding for research, I didn't always understand what the research was. And so today, I am an advocate for research, and you and I are on the research advocacy and training support team for Fight CRC Together, and we are learning about what research is being funded, what research is going on, how it's having an impact on our fellow cancer survivors and patients, to basically get a better grasp of what it is we're asking for when we're supporting increased funding, when we're talking to people about the hope that despite everything we're seeing in federal science, the hope that still exists, because really amazing things are happening. And we want to see that hope and those amazing things see the light of day to help keep our friends and fellow survivors alive.
It's pretty powerful, and I know that's what keeps me going, is just thinking about the other people that I've formed relationships with, that I just that are still in the battle, and just wanting to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that they have the best chance that they can to keep living a good life like you and I are right now. So
That's right.
It's so important. So so far we've heard kind of awareness. We've heard, kind of that legislative and research advocacy are your three main components. But I happen to know, like, you have a new role now in another group that we're both in.
I do.
Both very active in. Explain, that role right now that you're in, and then I'll ask you my question about the fourth kind of advocacy, I think.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So I'm the chairman of the board for Man Up to Cancer, which is an organization that helps men avoid isolation and find connection with other men during their cancer journeys. And my evolution with the organization is not that dissimilar from my evolution as a cancer advocate. I was invited to join the Howling Place, which at the time was the online private group for men facing cancer who had joined Man Up to Cancer. And kind of was on the outskirts of, like, at the time, I was an 8-year cancer survivor, and what do I have to offer these guys who are like in the middle of it, and I'm on the other side of it, and you're stage 4, and over time came to see that my experience with having an ostomy and neuropathy in my feet from chemo, I could offer help, and if nothing else, just that connection to see someone else in their experience. And then went to the Gathering of Wolves in 2023, and I joke that I fell in love with 110 men in one weekend, which is pretty much true, because you spend, that whole weekend, as like hugging on guys and telling guys you love them and learning about their stories. And I walked away from that experience telling Trevor Maxwell and Joe Bullock, like, whatever you need me to do, I am on board. And so I was fundraising director for a little bit. And then when Trevor decided to transition to more of a founder role, asked me to take on the role of board chairman. And here I am. And I could not be happier with, and really humbled by being in this role and being able to see what we get to see on a daily basis in this organization.
Yeah. So I'll just real quickly touch, if people missed it. fundraising, I consider the fourth kind of pillar of
Yep,
advocacy.
yep,
So that
yep.
was in there. But I just want to ask you, because, you bring up something, and, you just mentioned you do all four different forms of advocacy. You have this chairman role with Man Up to Cancer. You're a research advocate. I know you still do a lot of media appearances. You still do a lot of legislative advocacy. You do research advocacy. So you're doing all four. And you already talked about like how far out you are in your survivorship. What kind of keeps you going? Because I know it can be like, so difficult for somebody, especially after they get to no evidence of disease status, to still remain in this space, because it is something that is, we're surrounded by loss all the time. And I'll touch on that a little bit later, because I know there's a story there too that's personal to you. But, what keeps you going during this time?
Honestly, what keeps me going is the hope that we can one day, whether that's during my lifetime or not, we can get to a place where kids will ask, what the heck was cancer? Um, that's a big, audacious goal, but that has for a long time been my North Star of that sort of future history question of, what was this thing? And to be able, again, going back to my story, being able to use my story in every possible way to get there and to help other people and build relationships with people, to be able to say, I did absolutely everything I could with the experience that I had to get us there, is a big part of why I keep involved in cancer advocacy.
And I know it is a pretty big, audacious goal. And I wonder, how do you track like the progress that you're seeing happen? Because I know it's not a short game, it's a very long game. And so I know we all need a little bit of motivation to kind of keep us going. So what are those little motivations that you see that are keeping you going?
Tim, honestly, some of those motivations are stories like yours, where there's a liver transplant that gets you to no evidence of disease. There's advances in medication and treatment and immunology that gets a guy like Trevor to no evidence of active disease. So, the people that I know and love can live normal, whatever that word means, normal, active, full lives, with cancer, without cancer, but also seeing more people talk about, from just an awareness perspective, talk about getting screened and seeing those screening rates increase, and the types of testing that are available expand, so that we can get to a place where everyone will do, at the very least, the test that they will do, whatever that looks like. They get tested for colon cancer using whichever format it takes to get the job done. So there are several. It's been daunting this past year with all of the changes in federal research being cut, and all of those sort of negative things happening. But I've also had the opportunity to meet researchers at events like AACR, the American Association for Cancer Research, and ASCO GI, to be able to see that despite all of that, research is still happening. Research is continuing, and strides are still being made. And that also keeps me going. Like knowing that, 13, 14 years ago, we didn't talk about colon cancer. Today, we're talking about colon cancer in a way that we haven't for a very long time.
Yes. Yeah, I think, hearing those things and getting more involved, you do see like all the noise that we see publicly is not what you hear in these closer environments where you're actually talking with researchers and other people and other advocates. It's like, we do see the positive side of things that are still continuing. And I think one of my biggest moments this year or last year was participating in my first congressionally directed medical research program, peer review programs. And the one, we can't talk too much about what happened in those, but the one thing that got everybody on our panel the most excited was the biggest long shot probably of all the ones that we reviewed, but it probably had the biggest potential. And just to see the enthusiasm there, the conversation that was going, the way that some people were looking at it a little bit negatively and turned it into, being ultra excited about it was just like, that to me, I got off of that call and was like, man, this is exciting. I just want to do more,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I'm on panels for the CDMRP and for CPRIT, the Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas. And yeah, I love being on those panels to see firsthand and then hear the researchers who are in that room talk about what the impact could be if it works. And, they're asking questions that I have no idea which genetically modified mouse is the right one to do whatever they're doing and which protein switch needs to be flipped. But I can look at what the impact is going to be. And that always gives me excitement.
Yeah. So I know we're talking about something very positive. I'm going to go something a little bit more somber now, but
Sure.
I know, one thing that I've really been focused on lately is the loss that we experience as advocates, because we do build relationships, we do get close, and I know you had a very close relationship with somebody that we both knew, Ryan, who passed away not that long ago, and I know that took a big toll on you. And I know you share about that and you talk about it, but can you just explain, what keeps you going through that? And if you want to share something about Ryan, I think that would be wonderful too, because I don't want him to be forgotten at all. And I know you don't let that happen, but I think I really like talking about this when we talk about advocacy, because it's not all the positive things that come from it. It's also kind of the really difficult things that we have to experience to do advocacy work.
Yeah, I sat on a panel for ACS CAN several years ago. I said, the longer you're in this work, the more names you have on the back of your t-shirt, right, of people that you've lost. And Ryan was an amazing human being. He and I met. You were there actually at our Fight CRC Ambassador Weekend, and we hit it off that weekend, but our friendship didn't really grow until afterward. And I sent him a gift, and he was really touched by it, and that sort of grew and it sort of exploded our friendship, if you will, to the point that, every time we had the opportunity to be together, we were virtually inseparable. We were sort of like Butt and Jeff, because I'm this giant and he was 5'6", and, but we just loved being in the same place, and we had a lot of the same interests and talked about a lot of the same things. And we just loved each other dearly, and, loved talking, and we texted or we video chatted, and we called every day. And losing him after 2.5 years of friendship, we knew each other a very short period of time, but it was one of those friendships that just is life-changing. And he is really a big part of my North Star today. He died for really the interest of science. He was on a clinical trial, and he experienced what's called a cytokine storm, where basically his body attacked itself. and his lungs basically just essentially froze up. They just hardened because of the cytokine storm that he experienced. And there is work, for Fight CRC and for Man Up to Cancer that we were in this together. Like I changed, some of my advocacy roles specifically because we had things we were doing as friends, as fellow advocates together. And I continue that work in his name. And, as you know, I carry his face with me in all of my advocacy work. Because while I will certainly never forget him, his legacy will continue. He was committed to the same work that we are. And I love that I can still tell his story. I love talking about him. I love letting other people come to love him in the same way that I did.
And if anybody sees you in an advocacy event, you're going to be hard to miss. And I know Ryan will be right with you, probably on your lanyard or your name tag or, your shirt or whatever.
Absolutely.
Always with you. So, well, let's kind of wrap up here. I just have a couple fun questions that'll just be really quick. Don't think about them too long. Just state what the first thing that comes off of your head is. There's just like 4 of them. So don't, no pressure here. So, and these are just fun things, nothing to do with advocacy or cancer. So,
right. Okay.
Okay. So what is your favorite color?
Blue. Surprise.
Yeah. And for those that don't know, blue is the color for colorectal cancer. So, what's your favorite band or musician?
Oh, my favorite, Billy Joel, no question.
All right. And what's one place you've always wanted to visit and haven't yet?
Ireland.
And and one thing that most people don't know about you.
Oh gosh. I played tuba in my high school orchestra.
Awesome. I was trombone for about 3 weeks, I think.
I played trombone first, and the music teacher honestly looked at my face and he was like, "You have the embouchure of a tuba player, so we're going to move you over here, plus I need a tuba player." So basically I have giant lips, which is what you need to play a tuba. So.
Well, Michael, if you were to be talking with somebody who was thinking of getting into advocacy, maybe they're just recently diagnosed, maybe they're into their cancer journey, or chronic health journey, but haven't really taken that first step into advocacy, what is one piece of advice that you'd want to give them?
First of all, to take a step, whatever that looks like. And there are so many easy ways into advocacy. Respond to that action alert from Fight CRC, sign up for whatever, and really whatever organization it is that, whether it's your cancer or another health issue, sign up to be on their mailing list because you'll get those action alerts. And responding to an action alert is easy. And once you sort of take those steps, once you take that step, you can get more involved in your local community, in the state, in the federal government. But be open to taking that first step.
Awesome. And how can people get in touch with you, find out more about what you're doing and the stories that you share?
So I have a website, michaelholtzonline.com. You can also find me on Substack at Michael Holtz online. And that's where I've been doing most of my writing these days. So because they make it easy. Of course, I'm on Facebook and Twitter and all the socials. So, and my handle for everything is Michael Holtz online. So,
well, perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Michael. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim. I'm grateful for the opportunity. It's great to see you and to talk to you today.